It's a tale of the Australian digger in Vietnam who faced a brutal war of attrition while defying the stern, by-the-book discipline of their most powerful ally, finding strength not in stricter rules but in a simple, frosty bottle of beer. What unfolds will challenge everything you think you know about military discipline, reveal a shocking and pragmatic system for preserving sanity in hell, and deliver a deeper lesson on how the smallest ritual can win the most important battle, the one for the human spirit. Before we begin this journey together, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who understands that resilience often comes from unexpected places, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. U.S. Firebase in Vietnam, 1968. A tense briefing where a lieutenant reads a strict, uncompromising order forbidding any alcohol in forward areas, a breach punishable by court-martial. The message is clear: a soldier is a weapon system, and intoxication is a critical malfunction. Now cut to the Australian position at Nui Dat. Here, a section of grimy diggers, freshly returned from a 5-day patrol, sits on empty ammunition crates, methodically stripping and cleaning their SLR rifles. In their hands are not canteens, but frosty bottles of Foster's Lager, issued as part of their official combat ration. To the visiting American advisor, this scene is anathema, a shocking lapse in discipline, a red flag for poor morale and crumbling standards. But his assessment is a profound misreading. What he mistakes for degeneracy is in fact a deliberate and culturally ingrained system of psychological maintenance. This is the story of the ANZAC wet canteen, a tradition that embodied a radically different military philosophy. In a war dominated by American-scale logistics and Puritanical regulations, the Australians imported a hard-won, pragmatic wisdom from the trenches of 2 world wars, that a soldier is not a machine, and that a carefully governed ritual of shared respite could be as crucial to sustained combat effectiveness as belts of ammunition. We will explore how this simple, maligned act of drinking a beer was never about the alcohol. It was about a superior, institutional understanding of morale, the cementing of unit cohesion, and the management of the human spirit. Factors that forged a more resilient, tightly bonded, and, in the grinding reality of counterinsurgency, a more formidably effective fighter. This conflict was rooted in a fundamental clash of military culture. The American system, heavily influenced by Secretary Robert McNamara's systems analysis approach, treated warfare as a corporate enterprise. Discipline was top-down, rigid, and procedural. In this view, alcohol was a contaminant, a substance that impaired judgment, eroded unit readiness, and posed a security risk. It was a personal vice to be eradicated, with infractions met by strict court-martial. The Australian philosophy was its pragmatic opposite. The wet canteen was an institution dating back to World War I, a formal acknowledgement of a soldier's humanity. The digger tradition was built on horizontal, mateship-based discipline. Here, the real enemy was not the bottle, but cumulative, unmanaged stress. A controlled, communal drink was not a vice, but a sanctioned pressure valve, a tool for unit cohesion managed informally by the men themselves. Understanding this requires examining the ritual itself, not the drink. The beer was never for intoxication. It was a strictly limited commodity, often just 2 cans per man per day, and expensive. Its consumption followed a specific ritualistic pattern after stand to, or more importantly, immediately upon return from a prolonged patrol. The shared physical act of cracking a can, the visceral sensation of a cold drink in the oppressive heat, served a critical psychological function. It forcibly shifted a soldier's focus from the lingering trauma of the bush, the ambush sites, the constant tension, to the immediate sensory present. This was forced decompression, where an American soldier might internalize stress until it boiled over into a fragging incident or self-medication with heroin. The Australian ritual created a mandatory communal pause. It was a non-verbal debrief, a shared exhalation. This ritual acted as a powerful cohesion multiplier, directly feeding the core Australian military value of mateship. This was the antithesis of individualism. It was the cultivation of collective resilience. Sharing this scarce, valued resource reinforced primal social bonds. The common sight of an officer drinking alongside his men, unthinkable in the stratified U.S. Army, broke down formal barriers and fostered a unique form of mutual respect. This strengthened small unit trust on a molecular level. The man you shared a quiet, wordless beer with after a harrowing patrol was the man you trusted more implicitly during the next one. This translated directly to tactical cohesion, better intuitive communication, shared situational awareness, and a greater willingness to take risks for one another in a firefight. The efficacy of this system was proven in the crucible of its greatest test, the aftermath of the Battle of Long Tan in August 1966. After D Company, 6 RAR endured a monsoon-soaked nightmare, holding off a regimental-sized VC assault. The men were shattered by terror and exhaustion. The official response was telling. Instead of immediate isolation for clinical debriefs, RAAF helicopters were tasked with a critical morale mission, delivering cases of beer directly to the battered diggers. Command had sanctioned this. The effect was profound. The shared drink facilitated an immediate organic processing of trauma among the only people who truly understood it, the survivors themselves. It was a communal rite, an affirmation of shared survival and sacrifice. This stood in stark contrast to the later, more clinical and individual psychiatric care models for traumatized American troops, which could inadvertently isolate a soldier with his trauma. The results of this philosophy were measurable. Australian forces exhibited notably lower rates of the severe discipline problems that plagued the later U.S. effort: illicit drug abuse, particularly heroin, and fragging attacks on officers. This psychological stability created a more reliable, resilient soldier. A tightly bonded unit is not just steadier in defense, it is also more confidently aggressive on patrols and in setting ambushes. As historians and veterans have noted, the VC came to view the Australians as unpredictably and tenaciously aggressive. They fought with a different engine, not just for an abstract cause, but for the man beside them in a more immediate, personal way. Their morale was internally generated and self-sustaining. The American reaction to this system evolved from disdain to a kind of grudging envy. The high command view was initially one of scorn, seeing it as unprofessional laxity. But from the grunt's perspective, watching the Australians, a sense of envy grew. Many American soldiers saw the wet canteen as a more humane system and wondered at the apparent steadiness of their allies. While the U.S. military never officially adopted the practice, the implicit lessons about small unit cohesion and psychological resilience eventually permeated modern military thinking on morale and welfare. The diggers at Nui Dot were demonstrating a timeless truth long before it entered any official manual. So, was it really the beer? No, it was what the beer represented, a profound respect for the human element of soldiering that the vast industrial American war machine often overlooked. The Australians didn't just bring a beverage to a gunfight, they brought a century-old cultural understanding that an army fights on its morale as much as its materiel. Their wet canteen was a genius, low-tech piece of psychological kit, a sanctioned ritual that managed stress, cemented the unbreakable bonds of mateship, and created a more resilient, cohesive, and ultimately fearsome fighter. In the end, the Americans fought a war of logistics and firepower, while the Australians, in their own way, fought a war of sustained human will. The lesson from Nui Dot isn't that alcohol makes better soldiers, it's that ignoring the psychological and social needs of soldiers creates worse ones. The Australians won a small, crucial battle their allies didn't even know was being fought, the battle against the grinding, soul-destroying attrition of spirit. And sometimes the weapon for that fight came in a cold, familiar bottle.